All right. Thanks for coming on. This is the next installment of Science Squawk, and I appreciate you guys coming out today. I know it's a busy time, busy schedules, a lot of COVID research.
Son of a bitch.
Research going on, and there is Steve while he busts in during my introduction. Hey, Steve. You all right now? We're good? So again, thanks for coming on. This should be a really, really cool episode. I think this is one of those that has been coming for a long time now. I've been asked to do this locally, sitting on panels to talk about what it is people can do with their PhDs other than the academic track, right? So on this episode, we're not going to focus too much on what goes on in the academic track because it's been ingrained in most of you guys during your training, right? I can assume that that's what happens since I do not have a PhD, but I've heard through the grapevine. So what we're going to focus on is what happens afterwards. If you're once you've made that decision, what does that look like? What things go through your mind? What gives you that what is that moment when you decide to jump ship, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to start with one of you guys, work down the row of our panelists here, and kind of tell your story, what you guys did in the lab, how that started, what was intriguing, and then what moments from that point did you decide to jump, and then where talk about how you landed in that position, and then from there we'll cut into the conversation. So let's start, ladies first. So I'd like to introduce first Dr. Fernanda Cugola from Fate Therapeutics. And I've known her for a few years now.
Yeah.
Interesting story, a little bit of a celebrity status here. I believe you did some work on Zika or something you may want to talk about. But let's go ahead and start with you. And tell us your story. How did you decide to get your PhD? Because at least when I met you, you were kind of a researcher, bachelor's, working technically in the lab, and yeah, take it from there, Fernanda.
Yes, thank you, Abel. Appreciate you inviting me here today. So yeah, I guess I have to go back a little bit more on my story when I was finishing my undergrad, because when I finished my undergrad, I was a little bit disappointed with my career choices that I had in Brazil, and that's something I feel particular to my country, and the opportunities that are available there. So I finished my undergrad, I'm a biology major, and I knew then that I wouldn't have the options that I wanted as a job or as a career. I knew I didn't want to be in academia. So going to grad school wasn't like something that I wanted to take without much thought. So at that time, I decided to move to California, and shortly after I met Alison Moultrie, and we started having conversations about coming and working for him in the lab. And it took a little while, but he finally offered me an opportunity there for me to start as a research assistant. And it eventually evolved to a lab manager position. And that's when I started having, trying to get more information of where can I go from here and what kind of career options I would have there. And being in that environment of dealing with grad students, but at the same time not being necessarily part of the academia was very comfortable for me. And it just kind of reassured me that I wanted to be in industry, but not in academia. I knew that for sure. I didn't want to stay in academia, but it became more clear to me that I would have to go through grad school if I wanted to have better career choices. So go for it.
You said that you knew for a fact you didn't want to stay in academia, but was there a feeling? Was it just the pressure of having to write grants, or what exactly was that determining factor for you?
Yeah, like one thing that I've always liked to work in groups, to collaborate. And in academia, no matter what level you're in, you're a lot by yourself. And I feel like that's great for you to learn how to handle a project, come up with your results, your own, everything you need to do for grad school. But at the same time, as thinking in the long run, I never really liked to work by myself, and looking at the environment of the academia, I just wish people would collaborate more with each other. And that's not something you see happening a lot. So I just wanted that for myself. You know, if I knew that that wasn't my environment, you know, so I guess that was the biggest thing.
We're going to talk about kind of the kind of interaction between all of you guys and how you guys fit into the social environment and in the scientific community too. But your backgrounds are really, really strong. It's one of the reasons I chose you guys. Now, can you talk about some of the pivotal work that you did as a grad student? Like some of the like the virus stuff that you were doing, maybe. I know you don't like to talk about it, and I like to highlight. It's like it's not
mute off. Yes.
Yeah, no, of course. Like it was when I started my grad school in Brazil. Like I had no idea I was gonna be working with the Zika virus. Right? It just started 3 months after I started grad school. And it just like, we need to do this. We need to study this virus. We need to make this happen. So I immediately jumped in, and we had everything we needed it to have there. We had the virus, right. We had a virology core that was supplying the virus for us. And we had our lab, which was doing disease modeling and working with all the neuronal cells derived from iPSC. So we just had to get the virus in the cells, make all the differentiation, and see how the virus was working with it was, you know, like interfering with the neurodevelopment in the cells. So that's where
you basically, I mean,
I had
author basically on this seminal paper, right? I mean, I would be like, you know, shouting this from the roof everywhere I walk, kind of, you know.
Yeah. It felt very surreal. Let me tell you, it felt very surreal because when we started, when we sent out to Nature for the first time, and we're just going back and forth with all the rebates because they were very quick. They wanted to publish fast, and we were on top of it, but
sure.
Just giving all the answers that they wanted. I still couldn't believe, you know, like it never became real until like they actually said, congratulations, your paper been accepted. You know, like it never felt, at least for me, believable that this could happen, you know, so.
This is like, you know, rookie year, first game of the season in baseball, yeah. And you're like break out a grand slam first time up to bat. So
yeah,
the reason I bring this up is because now you know, with that kind of a publication, that kind of an impact factor, you can pretty much, you've got a leg up in academia, right? You can go places with that.
I heard that a lot. Yeah.
But now, you know, did that accelerate your placement into industry? Was the job hunt easier, or how much of a factor was that in helping you make that jump, or was it?
You know, I feel like Impress, you know, it gives a good impression to people who read my resume and say like, oh, he has you know, like she's first author in a Nature paper, you know, but I feel it also needs, it has to add up to everything else that I bring to the plate as well, you know, because I've seen people with amazing publication records and they don't evolve as much, you know, so I feel like it's just not the publication itself. You actually have to bring other stuff as well with that. So
we'll get into that too, because you know, over the years I have helped a ton of people make that transition, right, from academia to industry, and that's one of the things that I think is the hardest that I have to deal with when I'm helping recruit and help place people, is that the thought process of like, I've got this awesome first author Nature paper, I'm gonna get like 50, you know, once Pfizer and Lilly look at me, they're just gonna like hire me like that, right? And it's one of those things I want people to understand, that it's not as
and the other way around is true too, you know, the other way around is true too. Like you don't need to have like the best publications for you to have what it takes for you to get in a position. You know, you just have to know how to communicate and deliver that when you're being interviewed or doing a presentation. So
okay, cool. Now we'll fast forward. How did you end up at Fate? Was it Fate?
Was it Fate? I guess it was a little bit. I don't know, because I saw the position and I didn't apply at first, you know, and then people were just telling me, like people who knew I was looking for a job, they were just like, why don't you apply for this position? I'm like, I don't know. And then like second time came around and I was like, you know what, I'll give it a try. And I guess you can call it fate. I don't know, but so I applied, and it was like it really I like all the description. I could fit most of the requirements, So, but I feel like when I went for my
rare. That's rare when you can fit most of the requirements
yeah.
on a
Yeah.
Okay.
But when I went for my interview and I did my presentation, I feel like I could feel like a good chemistry and a good connection with everybody in the team, and that made me very excited about the opportunity, and I'm glad it happened. So
Awesome.
Cool. Can you sum up what is fate in a word? I mean, to people that don't know what it is, and also, did the Ebola paper in Nature knock it back? I mean, did you guys solve Ebola? Is it safe for me to walk naked throughout Zimbabwe now, or not?
No, I don't think it's even safe for you to walk with Zika around, but they're all still running. Yeah, but Fate Therapeutics, it's a cell-based cancer immunotherapy company. So, yeah.
Yes.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, let's go from that point and pivot now to the next person, because I know this is going to go fast. The hour goes fast, and I know once we get into the Bella Vista conversation, it goes super fast. So it does feel like I'm at Bella Vista. Seriously, like seeing you guys, familiar faces. We are missing the beers, but yeah, cool. So with that, let's go to Dr. Jerome Karpiak next, who also I've known for a few years, and you have an interesting career path too. Like it's a very nonlinear, in my opinion, nonlinear progression to the PhD and into industry. And so, tell us about your experience and your path.
Well, I'll start off by saying there was never a point where I was deciding between academia and industry. I had no intention of going to academia at any point as an adult. And the nonlinearity of my career path is split up between industry and academia. Each degree that I got, I worked in industry for a couple of years, then came back to school. I started bachelor's in engineering. I worked in the automotive industry because that's what you do in Detroit. That wasn't interesting to me, so I went back to school for biomedical engineering in Florida. I left the program and got a job doing tissue engineering, cartilage tissue engineering. I wasn't done with school, so I went back again for my PhD at UCSD with the intention of coming out of the program and getting an industry job in the area in San Diego. The motivation for that, I guess, is freedom and flexibility. I equate those with education, I guess. The more education I have, the more choices I have. And it turned out that way. It's a really nice biotech environment here in San Diego. I added a fundamental bioscience degree to my 2 engineering degrees. So that coupled with my experience in both the engineering side and the science side has really afforded me a lot of opportunities here in San Diego.
So you also came from a pretty badass lab too, right? Can you talk a little bit about the labs you come from? On the academic side?
The Motri lab here?
Right. There's a common theme here, right?
So in Detroit, I was actually, I was working, it was chemical engineering. So the work that I did was more pharmaceutical and capturing crystallization of model pharmaceuticals that are amorphous on lipid bilayers. And then when I moved to University of Florida in Ben Keselowski's lab, I was working on immunoengineering. It's where I also started working with stem cells. So I was working with human embryonic stem cells in an immuno lab. Kind of had 2 projects going on. And then when I came to UCSD, I joined a polymers lab initially because that's what I knew. My background was in biomaterials and polymers mostly from the engineering side. But then I very quickly, part of my motivation to go back to school for biomedical sciences, specifically I ended up in Allison's lab in a neurodevelopmental bio lab, was the fundamental science. I was missing a lot of the biology. And jumping forward into bioengineering without the biology was really tough. So I wanted to take a step back, and 3 years into my PhD, which was really tough, I switched labs. I was already collaborating with Allison's lab with this polymer scaffolding that I had designed in the previous lab, and he took me in, and after a couple years, I finished with a PhD and jumped right back into industry as planned.
So how long did that take to get your PhD? Now, from when you started the program officially?
13 years? I don't know.
I just remember a very bold statement at one point, like, I'm going to knock this out in 3 years. I'm like, wow, all right.
So some of the conversations we had morphed into, this kid got his PhD in 2 years. That's how Abel would introduce me, and I'd have to like correct him. No.
But did all that disparate, kind of background experience, in fact, give you kind of a creative edge where you weren't just siloed up, you understood that kind of riptide of how things really were creative? I mean, some very famous people, Francis Crick comes to mind, saying that is the source of real creativity when you start out in physics and jump to bio or chemical and et cetera. So maybe that gave you kind of a leg up, in designing real stuff. And also Fernanda.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wouldn't put myself in that league.
Yet. Well, you got another 13 years.
But the physics and engineering definitely help. Another issue is communication. Like Fernanda said, it's communication is very important. And it's true that engineers and scientists speak two different languages a lot of times. And if you can speak both of them, a company will scoop you up to be middleman. I mean, I'm really simplifying things, but there's a different approach. There's a different approach to problem solving, depending on your fundamentals. And because I've been able to build both, for me, it's helpful for me when I'm collaborating, and almost everything is a collaboration.
So then you went, what was your first job out of academia? Because you actually, this is your second now industry job, right? Is that correct?
Fifth.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, so from the Miotri lab to, yeah.
My most recent. So skipping Detroit and Florida, San Diego, I started at Valus Sciences, where I was working on a neuroinflammation model for high throughput, high content drug screening, mainly differentiating IPS into microglia and using them in a 3-cell co-culture for drug screening. I left Valus Sciences after a couple years and joined Organovo. They recruited me pretty heavily based on probably my tissue engineering background, as well as some bioprinting that I had done 10 years ago. They, soon after hiring me, they shifted gears and laid off their entire R&D team, and I did not survive that layoff. And the way that I got my current job, I'm currently at nanoCellect Biomedical, and I was actually having lunch with a good friend of mine, actually one of the people that recruited me to UCSD, who's president of nanoCellect, and I was talking to him about networking, and there were a couple of pharma companies in the area that I was targeting. There were 5 companies that I was really heavily targeting, and midway through lunch, where we were checking off the names of who he knew at these companies, he looked at me and he's like, "So you're available?" And I mean, that lunch turned into an opportunity, and now I'm working with nanoCellect.
And I'm glad you're mentioning all these different topics of the networking part, the communication, because those are all keys, and I think they're undervalued characteristics of applicants when they're making that transition, and I think they don't emphasize those characteristics enough when they're applying. But so same question to you, from going from Miotri's lab to Vala, how difficult was that? Did you find having somebody like Mutri on your resume and all, and the rest of your background, was it easy to make that transition? Did you apply to 50 places, 2 places?
I was pretty selective coming out. I initially wanted pharma. In fact, that's how I met Tushar a couple years ago.
Selective or cocky?
I was super interested in Vertex, but the places that I was applying to that I had an opportunity to do specifically neuroinflammation. One, we're fortunate here in San Diego. I wanted to stay in San Diego, and there are multiple places that I could apply to. I don't remember how many I applied to, but it was pretty quick. Once the connection was made between me and Mike Jeremiah, who formerly of the Valla Sciences as well, we moved pretty quickly, and my shoe-in was actually a friend of mine worked for the company, and she was leaving to go to Boston, and she introduced me, and it moved pretty quickly. I mean, networking is very important when you live in a biotech hub, looking for biotech jobs, and you're the middle of a lot of people's hub and spoke system, Abel.
I was going to say, a lot of it is made easier when you've got something like a Bella Vista social club right there, smack in the middle of the Miracle Coast, right, where we can exchange names, beers, and job openings. But cool. Keep that in mind still. There's a few more things I'm going to mention in the second half, or talk about the second half that I think are cool for people to learn about that are interested to make that transition. With that, and actually before that, I know Steve jumped in late. I did want to welcome again my partner in crime here, Steve Chappell, author extraordinaire. So definitely without Steve, I'd be lost, because he adds a different flavor and color to a lot of these conversations. And I appreciate your time here, Steve, too.
I apologize. The kids came in the in the plantation house here in Hawaii, and it got so loud in the other room. Somebody was chopping up Ono or killing a rooster or something, that I had to move into the back room here. But it's a nice view. You have ohia trees in the background. Sorry. We old people are, we're in deep sequestration somewhere in the islands. It's tough. Sorry, go ahead.
Cool. So, gone 2 out of 3, and so saving the best for last, right? I'd like to introduce Dr. Tushar Menon, who I've also known for quite a few years, also coming from another badass lab. I won't steal his thunder, but thanks a lot. Welcome. And yeah, same to you. How did you start? Why the PhD? And what coming from that lab as well, what led you to industry and your current position?
Yeah, thanks, Abel, and thanks for having me on. It's nice to connect with some old familiar faces in a time that we're all distancing. Yeah, I think I actually might have tread the academic path a little longer than Fernanda and Jerome here. I actually got my PhD at the University of Michigan. So back it up even a little bit further, like Fernanda, I'm from overseas. I grew up in India. I came to the US for my undergraduate degree at the Michigan State University. So I'm still a Spartan fan, of having then gone to University of Michigan, so hardcore Spartan sports fan. I then, honestly, why did I do my PhD? At the time I finished, so I did my undergraduate degree in biochemistry, and I had it was easy enough to tack on a second major because I had an extra semester to kill before I could do an application. So, did a second degree in genetics and microbiology. But at that point, honestly, it was path of least resistance. When I was done with an undergrad, it was just, if you were doing science and you were planning to do it seriously, you did at least a graduate degree and ideally a PhD. And so all my undergraduate advisors advised me to do it, and I did it. So I applied all over, ended up getting into the University of Michigan. And since my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was threatening that if I left the state, it might not work out between us, it was an easy choice. So, went to the University of Michigan, did my PhD there in the Department of Biological Chemistry. I did my thesis research on chromatin remodeling enzymes and how they affect transcriptional regulation. Specifically, my thesis was how it regulates in various kinds of cancer, including prostate cancer. So got my degree in that, and then started casting about for a postdoc. Again, honestly, path of least resistance. The timing was important. I finished my PhD in 2010, and it was, during the economic downslide, and, Pfizer, which had a R&D facility in Ann Arbor at the time, had just closed down the facility and let about, I forget, 2,000-3,000 scientists go. So all these highly overqualified Pfizer scientists were looking for jobs. At the same time as me, I did not have a very good shot at industry at the time. So the path kind of picked itself. Postdocs it was. Interviewed pretty widely and ended up being a slam dunk at the Salk Institute, where I came and interviewed in their Verma's lab, and was impressed by everything I saw at the institute, the lab, the colleagues I was going to have. Was a big draw for me. And again, there's a similarity to Fernanda there, where I really think the collegiality and the collaboration has been something that's always appealed to me about science, and I think I've gravitated towards that in my career. But I also have some similarities with Jerome in that I moved here from Michigan, so we both appreciate the weather. So I came to Inder's lab, and I was convinced he was going to put me on his BRCA1 project, because that was chromatin remodeling. It was involving chromatin and transcription, and to my pleasant surprise, Inder challenged me to think about gene editing, which has since kind of blown up. But it was, not a very popular technology at the time. I tinkered around with zinc finger nucleases for a couple of years, and then TALENs came along, and I jumped ship onto that because a couple of guys were like, "Hey, you should read this paper. You should try this," because zinc fingers wasn't working very well in my hands. Can't blame the technology for that. Could just be the competence of the user there. But I jumped onto TALENs, and soon CRISPR came out. And 2012, I still remember seeing that paper, and Gerald, who we both know very well, most people on the Mesa probably know, was my colleague. He said, "Yeah, I think this is going to really work." And I said, "You think? Okay, I'll give it a shot." And, years later, I met Jennifer Doudna at a Cold Spring Harbor conference, and I told her, "You rescued my postdoc career." I don't think that was very high on her list of priorities, but I wanted to let her know anyways, because it did a 180 at that point. I started adapting CRISPR technology to gene edit and develop, models of correcting genetic disease. The lab had a big component of iPSC-based models of genetic disease, and CRISPR was just a nice fit. I collaborated heavily with people working in lung biology, liver biology, and became the kind of jack of all trades, if you will. But I could help on multiple projects because the technology I had was so versatile. And that's when I really realized that I loved that collaboration and collegiality of science. And industry was the place I was going to find that. Like Fernanda said, I think academia is a fairly solitary pursuit. Your entire training teaches you to be self-dependent and show that you're self-dependent and independent in your research thinking. And so I gravitated towards looking at opportunities in industry, and it so happened Vertex had plans, and I didn't know this yet. They signed a collaboration with CRISPR Therapeutics, and they work in cystic fibrosis. And my last paper out of the Verma lab was gene editing CF. So it was just right place, right time, right fit. And that's how I landed the job. So that was my transition into industry.
Wow. So going back to like why I assembled the panel, right? It's obviously you guys have a very strong academic backgrounds, definitely way above the average as far as the thought processes, logic, just commitment to your craft. But I think the biggest things that I saw in all of you is that one, being from the lab 10 years in sales, and being just around people, lots of people. You guys were some of the most easiest researchers to work with. and not treating me like a virus. So thank you very much. But you know, seeing that, I knew, okay, you guys were going to go somewhere relatively, I would say not. It wasn't going to be as difficult, right? Because of your ability to just be a person with other people, regardless of your status. Like there's a lot, you know, I'm sure you'll agree. There's a lot of pretentiousness in the field, a lot of arrogance sometimes. Sometimes people get caught in their bubble, and they're so good at what they do, but they forget that there are other people out there that are just as good or even better, right? And they forget to kind of go, you know, take a step out of that bubble and connect. And you guys were really good at that. You guys were always willing to take on new projects, from what I hear from your colleagues. Even in when I was at Life Technologies, and there was a lot of collaborations. I know, Tushar, you were always like, "Yeah, I'll try this product. I'll try that. Yeah, I'll give you."
Right.
It was like, it was almost like a kid opening a new Lego box, right? Like, yeah, I'll check this out, and I'll let you know how it goes. And same with Fernanda and Jerome. You know, you guys were like, oh, new toy, new tool. Let's check it out. And so those are the kinds of things I think that, you know, for me being in industry as well, that help people excel, right? That just curiosity and that willingness to try new things, and not let the past background and accolades kind of cloud your judgment in moving forward. But again, powerful labs, but yet it still took like a few months to get into those positions, right? Would you say on average, Fernanda, how long? A couple months, 3 months, 4 months to get into?
Yeah, it was probably more, maybe like 6 months.
Okay. Yeah.
But like Jerome was mentioning before, when I decided to start applying, I was just wasn't randomly applying. I was being very specific and aiming at specific job posts that I had seen. So it takes some work, right? You craft your CV, you prepare your pitch, you know, like you're doing everything you're doing for that position. So it takes time. So it wasn't like I was necessarily going through a lot of interviews. So every time I saw a position, I prepared for that, and I was, you know, like shooting for that one. So it took a while. Yeah, it took like 6 months, I think.
Okay. And Jerome, would you say about the same length of time?
No, it's been much shorter for me.
Yeah.
And part of that is the specific things that I've done in my background, and how well matched they are here in San Diego to the biotech that's going on here. And the underlying Bella Vista being there as a social networking area, treat every conversation as a job interview, and then when you need one. I've been in the position when I got laid off. I didn't want to jump back in too soon and grab the first thing available. So maybe 6 weeks out of graduation, probably a month, 2 months. But I had already started lining that up before I finished.
And I think you're right in that I've seen that the people that have some of the kind of a potpourri of job experiences and kind of nonlinear, I guess, paths sometimes have the easiest times getting into those positions, because they fit so many of those job descriptions that are out there in cutting edge, you know, jobs that are in industry or in biotech. What I'm trying to say is you're not just doing a Western blot for 10 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's 1,000 of those people out there, and they're getting pumped out all the time, right? So I think that with industry, they're always looking to push that envelope and create new technologies and merge different fields. And I think people forget to like explore the different fields and maybe take a gamble in studying something else that's not necessarily within that line of sight, right? So like Tushar was talking about earlier, you know, your path of least resistance. Sometimes it's, you know, general bio degree, bio PhD, and then now I'm in the hunt for the same job with the thousands of other people. But you've got that, you know, I would never even have thought that someone with your background could get a PhD in the biological sciences like that. Just how does that happen, right? So really cool story.
You know, I was going to ask a quick question. in terms of the time of the COVID here, is this a time of like 2010 where it's a little bit shaky for biotech, or is this a wildly great time in which everybody's thinking, collaborating, and money's rushing in? Or is it kind of both, depending on whether you're in the right spot or not?
I mean, at nanoCellect Biomedical, I mean, we're hiring, and we've been doing remote training because we need people. I mean, everything's different right now. I'm training people through video like this, whereas normally it would be hands-on. But I don't know. It's a weird time. I can speak for my company, and I haven't been looking at openings, but I know people are getting jobs. People are moving from company to company comfortably.
I want to come back to that, but I want to flip to Tushar first. And I know that you, tell me more about your role in Vertex right now, because it's also not something that someone with a bio degree and a PhD will say, hey, I'm going to grow up and do project management, or because you're more of on the admin side now, right?
Yeah,
dirty.
Business science intersection kind of. Yeah, what happened? So I joined Vertex as a research scientist. So I was at the bench and driving projects from the lab. And then about a couple of years into it, and that's the great thing about an organization like Vertex or an industry in general, is it opens so many other doors for you. And that's something I want people to think about when they pick their career path. Because academia, you better be committed to the long term doing that thing, and it's great. And I think some of the most brilliant people I've met are academic scientists, and because they commit to that deep commitment to an area of specialty, you're literally the expert in your domain. On the other hand, industry is a much more versatile pursuit. I think you have to learn from other people. Actually, if you're only good at one thing, I don't think you necessarily succeed as much in industry. Industry demands that you learn new things. And so in my case, I was leading a gene editing project right up my alley. I could have kept doing that because I knew what was there to learn. But I saw that I'm part of such a bigger organization and so much of a bigger process of drug discovery. The research was just the tip of the iceberg. And I realized that beyond that comes the clinical development and the commercialization and all of that part. And project management is a discipline that kind of bridges all of that. And it was my curiosity to learn more of that drove me to follow an opportunity in this role, and it's been fantastic. I've learned more about drug discovery in 2 or 3 years than honestly my entire academic, training, 15 years of it combined. I mean, not just starting with undergrad. So I know more about what it really takes to take a research discovery and make it a product that helps patients, and that I would not have learned if I had just just stuck to my original role. So that's something I think people considering industry should strongly consider, that it opens up new avenues beyond the research.
That's awesome. I love this segment. We're gonna have to do like multiple parts. Maybe have you guys back later. But now let me flip this back to Jerome, because now you're not a typical bench scientist anymore either, right? At nanoCellect, what is your role, and how do you, because there's a lot of need for what you're doing. How do people understand, that these roles are necessary when they're going through their PhD program? How do you bridge that gap? So talk about your current role now and how we can kind of help others get there too, that have that bug.
So my current position at nanoCellect is field application scientist. When I was hired not too long ago, I was hired in to fill 2 roles: a bench scientist working on new applications at headquarters, and they also had a gap to fill. They needed someone to represent the company in the Midwest, work as a field application scientist. So I was brought in. If I had been brought in just for field application scientist, I probably wouldn't have been as excited about the position, just because it's new territory. I know the bench. I'm good at the bench. I've been working at the bench for many years. They lured me in by offering me a position that's 50% bench and 50% on the road. When I got in, very quickly we realized that I couldn't do it 50-50. And in order to really be good at the field applications and support the customers and educate the customers and best represent the company, I really needed to treat that as my full-time position. So I have since shifted to field application sciences, which is great. It's networking. It's just like I'm in different labs every week. I'm learning a lot of new science. The company that I work for is a fax sorter, like a microfluidics-based fax sorter that's more gentle than previous technologies for fax. So I'm in a lot of labs that have never done flow cytometry before, teaching them flow cytometry with their cells that in previous technologies they haven't been able to use flow cytometry. So it's a lot of teaching, it's a lot of learning, and it's a lot of travel in the Midwest for now, and I'm enjoying it. And did that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess it's more, you know, the most common question I get to when people are trying to leave the lab is like, what else can I do? And so it's, you know, unless somebody tells you that these jobs are available like this, and there's other hybrid positions being created, you don't really know. And I think the only question or the only answer I can give to them is again, going back to communicating, go out and talk to people on the Mesa, at Bella Vista, and ask people what they do. Only then will you find out that these positions even exist. And you guys probably know this too, a lot of times when positions are out there, they're usually already almost filled, even though they just got posted, right? So yeah, a lot of times these positions are created for specific people in mind. And so the only way you find out about them is if you network and continue to communicate with your peers. But
I just want to comment on that, Abel, because I would be remiss if I didn't call out. My job was not yet posted, and someone at the company who knew me from SQUAWK asked me to have lunch at Bella Vista. That's how I got the job. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that story.
Thank you. Yeah, I try. Like I said, I jokingly call it my postdoc rescue program. So, but yeah, and Fernanda, to you, like what's next now? Now, once you know you've been at Fate a few months now?
Yeah, 3 months. Like, what's next? Come now.
First season, right?
I expect to continue at Fate. So
what do you see yourself doing now that you've experienced that, you know?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you brought up this, because I remember when I started applying, I was like, I wasn't sure what kind of position I wanted it. And I've applied to different positions that require different skills, you know, because I wasn't too sure. And I think it takes for you to actually come into industry first to finally realize all the roles and everything that's possible, you know. And me working as a scientist right now, I wouldn't expect to enjoy it as much as I'm enjoying it right now, you know. But I wouldn't say this is the path. I'm open to other like Tushar was saying, like, it's good that you get to learn so much, and there's so many different areas, and you can move, you know, too. So who knows? Yeah.
Okay. And my former mentor and boss, who was on second episode, Sumit Chanda, you know, he used to tell me, you know, the first day, you know, that you start working is kind of like the first day you start looking for a new job. So and this is back, he'll probably won't admit that, you know, but that was, you know, him 20 years ago. And I think what he means is that you just have to keep your eyes open, and nothing's ever permanent, especially in this industry, the way different fields, you know, come and go, different technologies come and go, and
new job doesn't mean new company necessarily. It can mean new role within your company. And until you've joined the organization that you work for, you don't know, like this is the ongoing, I'm repeating now, but you don't know the positions that are there and the roles that are there until you're part of that organization. And the flexibility that I've seen in a lot of these companies is whether you're hired, like wherever you're hired into, they want you to excel at whatever you're good at within that organization. And it's of value to them to keep you within the company and move you to a position that you're a better fit for.
Interesting.
Well put.
So, okay. Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna ask something. So, what do academic institutes need to do better at opening up these options or educating their students? Is there something missing in the program? Because it just seems more and more that
you really don't get exposed to these options.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, unless you go out and network at Bella Vista or Able, you don't know what's out there. So really, I mean, I see more of that now. I've been invited back a bunch of times at the Salk and UCSD to just come and talk, and I'm always happy to do it because that's what I was missing when I went through it. More of that exposure would have been great.
Mm-hmm. Is there something they can do though? I mean, you think it's by design? Do you think it
Probably. I think they, the academic mindset, I mean, of the academic progeny succeeding in academia is really what enhances the reputation of the PIs and as mentors. I don't think they get any major points for guys that go into industry and disappear for a few years unless they emerge as a CEO somewhere someday and then the name is in the public domain. So I think that's a factor. I don't know about what the other guys think, but.
So, obviously you guys have your PhD. I do not. And again, going back to Sumit Chanda, I was fortunate enough to have great mentors along the way. But I remember Sumit early on, when I was deciding on that path, for me, having been married early and already had my first child, working at GNF at Novartis, it was something where he said, look, here's the story. You can go get your PhD, but here's what that life looks like for the next 4 to 7 years. Here's your new salary with your family. And then he knew I was a social butterfly. So he's like, here's the things that you're going to miss, and here's the things that you're going to have to give up, right? Or, you learn what's going on here, the cutting edge technology, and you take that same vigor and that same commitment and that drive and use industry as your PhD. Year 1, you go in, learn everything, you shut the F up. Year 2, and again, maybe he won't admit to it because it's Sumit. Year 2, you master everything that you're doing. And by year 3, if there's nothing new, you bounce and take your technology and go to the next job, but make sure that it's something different that's not in the textbook, because that's going to be your marketability going forward. And I did that. So I would do 2, if you look at my LinkedIn career, my path, it's 2 years and bounce, 2 years and bounce. And I did very well financially all the way through, the 10, 12 years straight, and, had double-digit merit increases every single year for over 12 years. And that was the advice that one guy, if I had not had Sumit to have that conversation, I don't even think he realizes how important that conversation was, right? And this is one of the things why I'm so adamant about doing what I do. Like you said, Tushar, someone helped me, and I'm trying to help others now, because this is the kind of stuff that, again, going to UCSD, even from the bachelor's, from an undergraduate perspective, this isn't taught, right? They're telling you, get your bachelor's, go out and go to grad school, and that's pretty much it. Then you get to grad school, and I'm assuming the same thing is like, hey, go out and postdoc, or and then fight for that PI position.
Path of least resistance. That's where they shepherd you naturally, and so you just go there.
Yeah. So, if a student walks up to you now, grad student, or maybe a PhD that's just finally figured out, hey, this isn't for me. Tushar, what's the first thing you tell them? What's the best piece of advice you can give that person?
Yeah, I mean, I've had few people reach out to me that way, some, at various forums and even just over LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk to them. And what I tell them is,
are they in tears usually, or no?
No, not. I can't tell on the phone. No, I think, I ask them what they want, where do they see themselves in 5 years, 10 years, and then, make their choices accordingly. There's some people who are just like, yeah, I want to be a PI and I want to, write my grants and, you don't get the public recognition in industry that you do in academia. So if that's important to you, and maybe it's important, maybe it's not, but you certainly don't. You're part of a team and you will not get recognized outside of your little sphere. Maybe not even then. It's just a team effort. It's a true team effort, so you have to know that going in. I've seen a lot of people in the industry setting, I don't want to say fail, but struggle because that recognition, they're craving that recognition because you get it throughout your academic training. Right. And then it's suddenly missing. So I tell them that, and then I tell them, but if what you want to do is learn different aspects, like Jerome was saying, like every organization, there's a true focus at a company like Vertex on career development. And that, in academia, you drive your career development. Mm-hmm. Your career goes where you go and you publish and you get grants and you get your name out there, and that's how you develop your career. In industry, I think it's really fostered from within. So I tell them that as well. So it really depends on what they want.
And Fernanda, now you're more recently, more recently flew the coop, and now again going back to you guys with your strong backgrounds here. What do you tell somebody that doesn't come from the badass labs that you guys have come from? Maybe not, it's more of a tier 2 or tier 3 type of lab. What do you tell someone like that, Fernanda? Like, what's the best advice to get that person into industry?
Yeah,
a lot more of those than you.
Yeah, I had this train of thought just coming from Tushar, what he was saying. I was like, don't ever go for the easy choice, like don't choose it because it's convenient, because it's what's right in front of you. Or if you do, make this choice as a conscious choice of knowing where you're going, why you're making that decision, because and I feel like, if you're not in such a good lab, what you can do is just put yourself out there and try to go to a lab that actually means something to you, or I don't know, that you actually want to go to, don't change your circumstances, but you've got to make you got to take that step, I guess.
So would you say they have to try a little bit more, network a little harder, or is it more of a volume game?
I like, for everyone that showed interest in coming to Alison Moultrie, for example, I was just like, send him an email, just show how interested you are, just because I could see from him like what he expected from people that he wanted to join the lab. And he always said, like, I want people that shows interest and commitment, so it's not simply sending out a CV, just like I did for many years with him. It's like, hey, what's going on in your lab? Do you have any opportunities? Like, let me go help, so I feel like this is where you can make a difference,
Interesting. Okay. Hustle's key. And that's one thing, regardless of any degree and any type of background, it's always about hustle, right? So Jerome,
Was it different for women, or is it that a bit of a cliche these days with so many women at medium to top in bio?
Good question. Fernanda, did you catch that?
Yeah.
There's a whole Brazilian women's mafia up here, right? At all levels. So maybe I'm wrong.
I think there is a tendency of like, that one person, so you always bring someone else to come and join, but I think that happens everywhere. If you have good people and you want to help good people, I don't care, no matter where you're from,
Actually, to that point, though, are there more women going into science these days? Do you know off the top of your head? Is it a growing trend?
It doesn't feel different from what it was before, not to me at least. I don't know. It's always been half and half from what I've noticed.
Okay.
I think in general, the biological sciences has a larger representation of women than other disciplines, engineering, for example.
Yeah, that's just a fact. Yeah.
And I even my workplace, it's very equal, and I think there's more in general.
We have a thing over at the SOC, the San Diego Unified STEAM Leadership Series, which I started, and we kicked off with Tina Nova, who, you know, and every year it's like 400 girls listening to somebody like Tina Nova or Catriona Jameson, and it kind of wows them. But it seems like we're reaching a threshold. I don't know. That's good. I mean, that there's more equality, at least.
Yeah.
But even people like Nova will say, you know, she was the only person in the board room meeting time and time again. She started, you know, many things. Genoptics, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. There's so many there's so many questions I want to ask, right? And I'm trying to be cognizant of time. And again, we might have to do like I know when this goes online and all that, it'll be one of the most watched. At least there's postdocs are always asking about this. And like I said, before this, it was UCC was going to put a panel together, but then COVID hit, and we didn't get to, you know, to present on this. But you know, we're trying to do the best we can with this media. So, you know, going to Tushar, you're you know, the current role that you're in is that the type of role someone needs to take to now get into like the C-suite from what from what you've seen?
Not necessarily. I think there's multiple paths, right? I mean, if you're in the research organization, just, I think, be good at what you do. I mean, it's truly a meritocracy in industry. It truly is. If you're good at what you do, and like Jerome said, and I've been saying, you can jump around within the organization. I don't think you have to be in management. You can be a really damn good research scientist and you can get promoted up that ladder. Or you can be in the business side and you can get promoted up that ladder. Or, you know, so I think it's purely a meritocracy. If you're good enough, it gets recognized because it benefits the company. It's you know, it's a true competition.
It's a good point too that you said the jumping around, because it's still persistent when I talk to students coming out of the lab. What do you say to somebody who's had, you know, that tells you, hey, I don't want to take this job because I don't know if I'll like it and I don't want to leave too early? Like, does that look, does it still carry a negative connotation to be somewhere for 6 months, a year and a half and leave? Would you hire somebody like that that's been at 3 different jobs in over a 3-year span? Anybody want to take that?
It's a big red flag for me, hiring.
Okay. So
I know everyone has different circumstances, but that alone on its face without any other information is...
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say at the very least, be prepared for the interview question.
Sure.
Right? So if you can explain it well, but you should know you're going to get that question in your interview.
Right.
Jerome's point, if it's enough of a red flag that you don't get the interview, that's where you worry about it. But he's prepared mentally to answer that question in your interview.
And Fernanda, I know you've only been
I don't have experience in that.
I'm ready to bounce.
I've never been on the other side. I've only been hired. I haven't hired anyone yet. So yeah, it hasn't happened, but good point. Yeah.
Okay. And science in general, it seems like there's less and less people trying to get into the sciences in general, right? Or at least from what I've seen in the numbers. How do we as scientists bridge that gap and get more people to join? Because like you said, Tushar, earlier, like you have to have a deep commitment, right? Because, you know, it's a very grueling process, and the pay may not necessarily be representative of that process, that grueling process. How do you convince somebody to take that road versus working at Target for 12, 15 years, you know, and getting the same amount of, or if not more, without the degrees and the debts? I mean, how do we convince those people to continue to jump into the sciences?
So I personally, until recently, for the last 9 years, I've been tutoring high school kids, high school age young men and women at Reality Changers.
Oh, that's right.
It's a program to get like first generation college grads is the goal. And I push STEM really hard as a tutor. Another thing that you can do for Reality Changers is offer like job shadowing. So I'll at each of the companies that I've worked at, I'll bring some of the students in on job shadow day and and typically I try to show them multiple roles, not just the scientists, but the science, the business, the people that work in supply chain, just because I can push science all day, but if it falls on deaf ears, then I'm just talking. So I want to introduce them to all areas that they can work in, and then try to slide STEM in as well. So I try to get kids interested before they're college level, and then help support them after, once they enter college as well.
Interesting. Okay.
Nice. Fantastic. I was going to say, I think at that stage, college and post-college level, if you have to convince someone, and they probably shouldn't go into science. I think, you know, because it's such a long and arduous journey. If you have to convince somebody who's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old that they should go into science, I think they're going to be miserable. I mean, sure. That's a contradictory view, but to Jerome's point, you got to start early. And if they show that aptitude and interest, then you foster that.
And the curiosity is the big drive. And if they have it, and you help support that, and
yeah, you just want them to discover that on their own. I strongly believe in that, because the worst advice I can give some undergrad is you should do a PhD when he's not truly into science, because then he's going to curse me for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. That guy told me to do this and it sucks. And it never ends.
And again, going back to you guys specifically, to me, you guys are outliers. You guys are not the average, So there's a lot of things that others that don't have that pedigree, of research or researchers that you worked under. What would you do differently, I guess, to accelerate where you're at, if you didn't have some of those, some of those benefits of having, a Verma or a Miotree, if you were in a lower tiered lab, what would you have done differently?
I think one thing like that comes to my mind, and this is something that's not new to anyone, is just when it comes like to be prepared to go through an interview process, and they say like, just apply to jobs, go through interviews, see how it works, and you don't really realize what you're doing wrong until you've gone through a few of the interviews, get a feedback, and then you're like, oh, okay, I shouldn't have said that, or should have said something different. Yes. So I feel like if I could have done something different, was actually just starting for applying for a few positions, just to go through the process and get a little bit better at my interview process, and then just making sure that happens smoothly from that point on, but yeah.
I always like to tell people to build their technical skill set, right? So industry is all about it starts with a technical fit, and then and then you look at the cultural fit and the quality of the candidate and so on. But even if you're not from like a name recognition lab, you should go out there, and to Fernanda's point, it's all about preparation. You look at what jobs are posted, look at the listings of jobs that sound interesting to you, and try to build that skill set. I think every lab, doesn't matter how big or small it is, offers you opportunities. Like, Jerome talked about fax. That's an extremely saleable skill set. Go work on that technology. Go work on gene editing. Go work on mass spectrometry. There are certain skills that will always be in demand in industry because that's the stock in trade. That gets your foot in the door. And then, like I said, then you're part of a meritocracy. Then you have a chance to move your way up because you're good at your job and you reach beyond your job. And really, that's where the growth in companies comes, is when you see individuals that want to do more than just run the fax machine and want to do more beyond that.
Very cool. Jerome, anything to add there, or what would you do differently? Because
I mean,
we're definitely different.
I'm in a good position right now where I am. So, I mean, hindsight, I can say that I'd change this or that, and maybe I wouldn't be where I am now.
Yeah.
But
okay, fair enough. Because some people
finish high school, maybe. Everything I did took a really long time, starting with my GED. But
did you finish high school?
With a GED. I have like a certificate that says that I know as much as a 12th grader.
That's awesome. You know,
Um,
I'm telling you, I love the panel. The
proof is in the pudding, I guess, is the phrase.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that to that point of Fernanda was saying about interviewing and preparing. I know one of the things I tell people, and I don't do this as much anymore, right? I'm a little older now and just more situated. But it was, you know, again, going back to the first day of work, 'cause the first day you start looking for a new job. You know, I would take
to wear sunglasses to interviews. Is that?
Well, I've got a swollen eye, so I'm doing the Steve Chappell look today. I didn't want to scare people from the no, it's the cool science SQUAWK look.
I see. I thought it was a branding move here. I didn't realize you'd run into a door.
I was going to do the Nick Fury patch, but no, I decided the sunglasses would look better. But no, I would literally interview 5 to 6 times a year, 7 times a year, and just anything that looked relevant. One, to essentially just practice, right? It gets me in the mood and the zone of what questions are being asked this year, what HR questions are common, and you know, maybe if you know, someone actually ended up hiring me, I could always say no. I didn't have to take the job necessarily, right?
It takes a lot of confidence to do that. Right?
Well, in the opposite,
you care about rejection. You're there for the practice.
I'm trying to be, you know, learn to be more comfortable in that uncomfortable situation. Or like Amanda's brother's book, right? Deliberate discomfort, right? You're throwing yourself in there until it becomes natural. But you know, you finally then see that job you want. And now you're 6, 7 interviews deep. You can go in there much more comfortable and confident than if it's like Fernanda said, your first application, you want that job and you're nervous as hell and you say all these things you think are super cool and you find out, I said all the things that I shouldn't have said, and then that's it, right? You got to start over. So yeah, and then the other thing is you kind of find out what you're worth in case you get a yes, right? You keep industry, you know, accountable, right? You sometimes find out, hey, I didn't know I was worth 20,000 more or 15,000 more, like. You don't have to necessarily leave, but it's something you go back to your boss saying, hey, I want to be here, like this job. Can you get close, right? So, yeah, I think everything is just a moving target, right? And you just have to keep moving with that target. But I don't know what. There's so many questions.
One thing, Abel.
Huh?
I do want to speak up to this one point because I don't want folks who are in academia right now to get the impression what they're doing is not a valuable pursuit, right? One thing I want to say about, even if you're going to industry, a PhD counts for a lot. It helps your entry level. You learn how to be a versatile scientist, and that's all what industry is about. If you do a postdoc on top of that, you're coming in at a higher level already. You get projects from the get-go because you've shown that you can do that. So I don't want anyone to think that it's a futile pursuit. It's essential to land a good job. I mean, it's not essential, as we know, lots of other jobs out there, but it really helps you land a better job to start.
Right. And even to that point, like I know that I definitely excelled in my career doing all the things that I've told you about, but you hit a cap much earlier.
I've heard that a lot too, yeah.
And
the other day I was in a meeting, we were talking about someone who was a candidate, and we were like, well, but he's an excellent candidate, but you know, he won't get this, or he was applying for a certain level of a job, and honestly, I didn't agree with it, but it comes up.
Yeah, I definitely I've heard that. It's not as common, I guess, as it was 10, 15 years, but it's still there. It's still common.
Yeah, this was an advanced candidate, just to be clear. This guy was, you know, he had a bunch of industry experience already, but when it came up to him versus someone with a similar amount of experience, but a PhD, and it was for like a director level position, makes a difference. So like you said, there's a cap. It's just artificial, in my opinion. I don't think it should be there, but
I look at
don't throw your PhD out the window just yet.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's a really great point. I think if you want to run quick and you want to do the science and love the science, you know, I'm that souped up Honda Civic, right? But I'm going to max out at 110, right? And you've got the Lamborghini. That's the PhD. You can keep going and going and going, right? So that's awesome. Is there anything else that we've left out that we could address for people, you know, because there's, again, so many PhDs, so many great candidates out there. We're in an awesome hub, Miracle Coast, 400, 500 biotechs in the area. But, You know, you've got Salk, LJI, UCSD, Scripps, Burnham. I mean, we're pumping out a lot of great scientists. What's missing? I mean, how can we help these people that are looking for that may not have that commitment, like you were saying earlier? What do we do to bridge that gap so that they learn more about what it takes to get industry? Is it more seminars, webinars? Is it more social interactions? What do we do here?
Can I go?
Yeah.
Like, no, it's just I feel like you should never forget, even though you're in grad school, don't ever compartment this like, oh, this is my grad school, this is next step, you know, like whatever you're doing next starts in grad school. So either you're improving your skills or networking, or, you know, like getting all the information that you need to move for your next step, it starts during grad school. So that's the message I want to throw.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I mean, you always have to think about what's next. And like different grad schools, I can speak for UCSD, they have programs like micro MBA that aren't part of the curriculum of my PhD program, but a lot of people in my PhD program took it and then got exposure to people that were in industry and were able to network with folks that were on the business side. Additionally, internships, if you can get in an internship during grad school, both engineering schools that I went to, that was part of the curriculum, whether it was a preceptorship following around an MD for a semester, or actually working at a company for a semester. I didn't see that in most of the biomedical sciences programs, and I think that's not common to have internships. But if you can get any kind of industry experience, it goes a long way. I will consider someone with industry experience over someone fresh out of a high level, like you were saying, famous lab.
Agreed.
For a number of reasons, but any kind of industry experience that you can get to get exposure and figure out who you are, where you fit.
I couldn't agree more, Jerome. I think that's a big missing component of current academic training in the biomedical sciences. There is no internship program, exchange program, collaboration program that allows you to do that in the course of your training. And you have to go and seek it out. It either happens for you because of where you are, or it doesn't. So I think that's extremely undervalued. And Jerome, to your point, again, industry experience trumps all, because you know that person knows how to work in that environment, interact in that environment. All three of us have spoken to communication. It's huge. And the other part is network. Get yourself out there. It's kind of counterintuitive to some scientists, like, tend to be more introspective and not necessarily. I think I'm probably a little more than most, but even he, Abel had to drag me out to several events that really helped get me out there. So that's don't underrate that. At the very worst, you have a good time.
And it's funny because today you've got all of these social media platforms. You've got areas you can frequent. Like I go back to, if there are people that are undergraduates right now that are watching the show or are going to watch this show that have a hard time getting into even a lab, right, to get that experience. I'm going to go and give you this quick story. I was an undergraduate, being back in the 90s. Working for, as a custodian at the UCSD housing department, making $12, $13 an hour. This is when minimum wage is $4, $4.25 an hour. I could not get a lab job. I applied, because it was like entry-level dishwashing, but it was like, what experience do you have? I'm like, wait, this is a glass washing position. You want experience? How do you get that, even at that level, right? So 6 months, you couldn't get anything, but I'm making good money. Back then as a custodian. So this is just when the internet was starting, email was, kind of funky. I actually ended up going to the bio department and getting their directory and going down the line of every single biology professor there was. There's 30 of them, at least 30. I called every single one of them and said, I will work for you for at least 3 months for free. Out of those 30, 4 called back. Out of those 4, I interviewed with 2 that were pretty cool. And I got picked up by Dr. Kirk Hammond at the VA hospital doing cardiology research. And
Well, that's advice from Mark Twain, just to bring in a literary.
that's right.
But nobody ever offers to do that, so they just have to see you. Somebody does.
Right. So actually, that's what the PI said. Hey, I never turn down free work. And if you're going to be doing this for free, I'm going to pair you up. You're not going to wash dishes. I'm going to put you next to one of my best postdoc, and you're going to do some cool projects. And those 3 months, it ended up being 6 weeks before he's like, dude, this is pretty cool. You're doing good work. I wrote you into a grant. I've got funding. I started getting paid. Then I started getting sent to all these seminars, blah, blah, to present, yada, yada. From that point on, after I think 6 months of being in that lab, applied to Burnham, applied to script, I started getting calls, right? And that's how my career just started. And actually the admin for that lab was Ann Kuwahara, who was your admin at Salk, right? Back in the, do you remember Ann Kuwahara? So 20 years later, I'm stepping in as Life Tech, and she was actually the one who interviewed me and brought me in to see, Dr. Hammond. But it comes back full circle 20 years later. She's like, oh my God, she made my life so much easier getting into the account as a salesperson because of that work I did 20 years in the past. It's just the network, right? It's just,
yeah,
you can't piss anybody off. You can't burn bridges. And I think we're kind of coming up, we're past the hour. I appreciate your time. Do we have time for maybe one more? You guys, one more question as I come down?
I'm good.
Steve, you good?
Let's do it.
All right, because we can edit out all the funkiness later. Oh my God, and now I'm forgetting the question.
Was it about COVID and the times we're in?
That could be one.
Or not,
So in terms of networking, right? We said that a lot. What does it actually mean to network? And if you guys can just quickly go down, Fernanda, what is networking to you? What would you tell somebody is a proper way to network?
Ooh, is there a proper way to network? I don't know if there's guidelines for this. I don't know, Abel. For me, whenever people would say oh, you need a network, just let's go networking. I was never that social butterfly that will go jump from group to group and introduce myself. But at least for me, I make sure that my coworkers or people that I know from them, I treat them with respect and I treat them well. And you just want to make sure that whatever impression that person's getting from you is a good one. And then you don't even know how this relationship is gonna turn into, so you just make sure you treat your coworkers well, because you never know how the world's gonna turn and who you're gonna run into one day. So
cool. So just put yourself out there. All right, Jerome.
So, I mean, I agree 100%. And like I said earlier, you treat every interaction like it's an interview, whether it's for a job right now, or like you said, for a job 20 years from now. Listen more than you talk, remember, and you have to get out there in order to network a little bit. Bella Vista is the perfect place, right?
Awesome.
I agree with that. I actually think it's impossible, if you really look at it, not to network in science. It's a limited circle. You go out to conferences, you see the same people. You go to Bella Vista for lunch, you run into the same people. You got to take advantage of those chance collisions, though, right? It's like Brownian motion, and you keep bumping into the same molecules over and over. Eventually, you got to make that connection. So you go to a conference, you sit at a table with a bunch of people. They force you to interact. I'll be honest with you. I didn't want to talk to someone after 8 hours of seminars, but that's key. That's that moment where you take that extra effort and you talk to someone at that table. That might be the connection that gets you your next job or your next collaboration, or you get your next paper from. So, take advantage of those chance interactions that happen all the time in our world. In San Diego, there's no excuse. We're surrounded by so much opportunity for interaction.
I thought you were going to say beer, but yeah.
That's a good chance interaction as well.
Don't be afraid to talk to people, right?
Yeah, put yourself out there.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I like to tell people it's a pitch and catch, right? Yeah. And sometimes you're going to be pitching more than you're catching, right? But there's got to be value on both sides. It's not just giving a resume. Hey, I just networked and I just hit you up on LinkedIn and I have a connection. Hey, now give me a job. It's not, what is that person getting from you, and what are you getting from that person? And it may not be, you know, a jobber for all. Maybe it's you know, advice about surfing or you know,
Sure.
something. But there's got to be something of value that lets you know that this person is there to help and not necessarily buy your you know, your time, but you know, we always look for value in the things that we do. And if you're just going to be one of those people that takes and asks, it's not going to get you anywhere, right? Sometimes it's just as easy as, like, you know, pointing somebody in the right direction if they're lost on campus, right? And starting up that conversation. And next time they may do something favorable for you. And then the more, like you said, that Brownian motion, the more times you do that, the more likely you are to repeat that that collision, right? Now you're what happened by chance. Now you're directing and having it be I don't know what's the word, enabled, consistently enabled. Anyways, it's just something you have to work at, right? It's not something that's just given to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Anything else you want to add, Steve? Because I know we're
No, it's very interesting. I think people who are listening learn more than on most shows where somebody sort of espouses whatever. I mean, and everything you guys said, if you just took out the word science, it would work for life and many other types of jobs as well. So it's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Any last words, guys? Is good?
No, thanks for having us, Abel. Thanks for putting this together.
Thank you.
No,
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so
you
much.
guys, man. Like I said, I can't wait for the this whole thing to kind of settle, and we're able to, you know, socially distance gather or whatever, safely gather back at the Bella Vista or some other place that Amanda's cooking up. She's always got ideas. But no, I appreciate your time. I know you guys are super busy. Science never stops, right? I would love to have you guys back at some point if you guys are willing, because I think there's a lot of things that we can continue to cover, but also on the science side, you know, what you guys are doing. Part of what we do on this show is to disseminate accurate information, real science to the community, what we're trying to do, and dispel some of the myths that are out there. I think there's a huge gap between the science and the non-science community, and that's on us to try to, you know, make that gap smaller and smaller by education and being out there. But I know a lot of times we're so busy in the lab, like you said, Tushar, you're 12 hours deep. Last thing you want to do is talk and spend some extra time doing something. But
And you know, it is a Bella V channel. You can go to YouTube and you can see David Brin or Allison Moutry, and of course this show put up there. So it's like a weekly schedule. It's kind of amazing, really, in the absence of face-to-face. It's all digital, and it's up there in a very cute visual way. So thanks for coming, and Bella V TV. Thanks you.
Yeah. Well, with that, that concludes this show, and I think we're taking a week off Memorial Day.
Couple days, then we're going to have Amanda herself is going to have the director of the last Tom Hanks movie, who's somebody she went to high school with, you know, that kind of thing. Talk about networking. It starts early in Alameda, and that's where she's from. And we're also going to all chip in and try to get Abel, you know, a pair of like regular glasses and stuff.
right. Not the running glasses. You know, I'm not running because I really can't go out right now. But yeah, I think after Memorial Day, I think we've got CTO of Care Of. It's a supplement company that's going to be joining us and talk to us about how an engineer from UCSD made his way into the supplements world and became a chief technical officer. So again, not just biological science, but you know, engineers and you know, science is science. So we'll welcome everybody. Yeah. So thanks, guys.
Gotta go feed the geckos.
Lovely Hawaii. Looks like I love the background. But all right, guys. Well, thank you very much again. I hope to see you soon. And yeah, we'll catch up soon.
All
right.
Cheers.
SQUAWK is out. Thank you.